So welcome, Michael Monte, here today to talk about CCTV archives, kind of a look back.
Appreciate it.
If there was probably a who's who of who's helped make Burlington, so that like you'd probably be on the list.
Yeah, sweet, thank you.
Would you agree?
Well, I was around. I was certainly active, and I was a participant in at least a couple of administrations, and certainly in the community even before that. So, yeah, I would say that certainly I have certainly a history.
Yeah.
And I think did some stuff with others that I think have been still permanent and really good for the city.
Cool. Well, let's get into that. So currently you're the new executive director at Champlain Housing Trust.
That's right.
Right? And what brought you originally to Burlington?
Oh, well, I grew up in Brooklyn, in New York City. Went to school in upstate New York, which was fine. But if you're in upstate New York in the mid-'70s, you either worked at the nuke plant or helped build a new nuke plant, and that was basically it. So me and my current wife moved here in 1976. We had picked a handful of places to visit. Had a friend who was working at Goddard. Never got past Burlington. Came back, sold stuff, came over here, moved here in November '76, and so that's what got me here. I mean, it just had a good climate in relative terms, compared to the amount of snow in upstate New York. Had 5 colleges at that time, so we had not finished school, and seemed like it had good employment. Had some great things going on in the community. So, great city.
1976. What are some of the things, when you say great things going on in the community?
Well, I mean, the things, there were no bagels and there were no pizza, so that was a struggle for me, right?
Uh-huh.
That was the first thing. But
where are you from in Brooklyn?
In East Flatbush.
Okay.
Yeah, but I went to school in Crown Heights. I went to school in Brownsville, and I was in the middle between Manhattan and the beaches, so it was a great spot. But what I noticed, one of the things I noticed is where Courthouse Plaza is now. There were these 4x8 pieces of plywood covering up what had been burnt down. I think it was the old Strong Theater. And all these pieces of plywood there, and every piece of plywood had a message from a community organization of some kind.
Huh.
It had read the call, come to the community health center, this is happening, that's happening. And it was just like a billboard, and everybody had, you reserved your place on the billboard for a month, and you got to put a message up. I thought that was so cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I thought that was like,
yeah.
Oh, look at this. This community is engaged in something. There are people doing things here.
Yeah.
That was the first thing.
And what were you doing when you got here? What was?
Well, I had at a very
behind?
young age been the director of a crisis center for youth,
Okay.
kind of a peer counseling stuff, and had basically done the hotline and sort of actually a little shelter. And so when I moved here, I immediately started doing some youth work. I actually volunteered at Spectrum, and then I worked directly for the King Street Youth Center, or a youth employment agency, and then the King Street Youth Center. I became the director of the King Street Youth Center in '77, and was the director there till '92, when I went to go work for the city in the planning office.
What was your proclivity? What were your strengths that led you into those positions?
Well, all the things I wanted to do. I was very much something of a Bookshire-nite.
Mm-hmm.
So you know what that is, right?
Murray Bookshire
Okay. Follower. I was very much involved in thinking that the community knows that neighborhoods are important, that neighborhood people understood what needed to be done. So I was a decentralist that way. I really felt strongly that that's what we really needed in society as a whole.
Yeah.
And so when I got here and I got the opportunity to work as a director of the King Street Youth Center, there it was. There was a center, neighborhood focused. The people who lived in the neighborhood were working there. They were running the place.
Yeah.
They needed a guy who knew how to be a director of things, how to move things along that way. And so that was perfect for me. That was the neighborhood knows what to do.
What was King Street neighborhood like in those days?
It was very low income still, as it is now. It was tough neighborhood relatively. The old North End and King Street neighborhood were considered tough
renewal.
neighborhoods.
So we have neighborhood that
No,
moves
urban renewal in the city had happened.
Had happened. Okay.
Had happened already. But right about when I got there, we began to see that the development of Burlington Church Street Marketplace, the Waterfront, were all going to have impacts on the adjoining neighborhoods. And so we organized, one of the first things that I did when we were there was they wanted to turn the Bobbin Mill, the Spool and Bobbin apartments now, into a festival marketplace.
Oh, okay.
And that was going to then basically take the neighborhood and turn it into sort of a commercial retail area, and the neighborhood was going to gentrify. So we organized to say, no, that should not happen. What we really needed was affordable housing. And the city responded, actually.
That was under?
It was under Paquette
at
that time, with a program which basically took old buildings, historic preservation, renovated them, and made them permanently affordable, or made them affordable, certainly.
And were there federal housing subsidies
all
coming
kinds
into
of
the city?
all kinds of federal housing money came in. There was really a 3-year program, and King Street Neighborhood Revitalization Program was established, which helped them, sort of take the buildings and convert them. The Bobbin Mill turned into affordable apartments. The Wharf, which was an old General Electric building, turned into affordable apartments. The Dugan Block, that yellow building with the different tiles on the top, is that King and St. Paul? All those buildings turned into affordable housing. About 200 or so apartments. That's why when you go to that neighborhood now, and you see what the King Street Center is now, it's serving a population of people who are fairly low income, very low income. And the neighborhood now basically is what it used to be. It did not gentrify.
Yeah.
People weren't displaced.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of that going on right now.
A lot of
in
displacement.
Chittenden County.
Yeah.
In different neighborhoods, different cities like Winooski.
We can get into that a little bit.
Okay.
Because,
slow down.
your life comes full circle. You're right across the street from the King Street.
Yeah,
It's
I haven't.
kind of amazing.
I haven't in my work life, other than when I worked at home for a handful of years, I haven't really not worked at either Main Street, King Street, or Maple Street in terms of where I've been working.
Yeah.
It's been that one little center of the world right there.
Well, you're director of King Street Youth Center. There's something that happens. And what?
So one of the things we did as the King Street Youth Center, we began to look at the opportunity to organize other neighborhoods. People wanted to do more like what we were doing. We said, okay, let's organize neighborhoods and let's make issue-based organizing the issue, the way to do this. We hired Phil Friamonte, who became Sanders' chief of staff. We hired Jane Driscoll as a Vista volunteer, along with another woman. And we began to organize in the Lakeside neighborhood, Franklin Square, the Old North End, and at the same time a group called Vermont Alliance began to organize in the city too.
When you say we hired, who's we?
King Street
King Street
Center.
Okay. Yeah.
And so that was we were doing sort of the youth work and the kids work and the neighborhood work, but then also expanding and organizing in other neighborhoods.
You were doing advocacy work.
Everywhere.
Which is really different. Not all nonprofits at this point are involved in advocacy in this way.
The whole idea of what we said is that if there's a struggle in this neighborhood, the resolution is to advocate for a better neighborhood, better quality of life. So things like stop signs and traffic and policing and a whole range of things were all the issues we were advocating for. And when we had expanded, we began to talk more about those kinds of things. At the time, the Southern Connector impact on the Lakeside neighborhood, Franklin Square wanting to have a better response from the Housing Authority, Old North End actually talking a lot about policing and the need for more public safety. That really kind of all of that work kind of led to the 1981 election of Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
I mean, because there was unrest in the city. People weren't unhappy with Gordon Paquette at the time, and gave Bernie the opportunity, I think, to win an election. That was a backdrop, I think, for all of that. He won, and then I stayed with the youth center for another year or so. But then there was a job in the planning office, which I thought would be kind of cool to do. And I did it for a year, left. Then they created CEDO soon after I left.
Oh,
and
so you left the city,
Yeah.
and then they create CEDO. And just for folks who don't know, can you tell us what CEDO is?
Community and Economic Development Office, and I was an assistant director there when it first got started. And it was really
Who were you working
May
with?
1983.
John Davis, or was?
John wasn't there yet. No,
Okay.
it was Brenda Torpy.
Oh, was the director?
No, excuse me. Peter Clavel was the director.
Oh, okay.
Peter Clavel was the first
Okay, great,
director. They had Peter had worked on the city council creating a new office, and they created it, and then they did a worldwide search, and then they hired Peter. And so he was the first director. Then he called me up and said, would you like to come back? And I said, yeah, state's not working out as well as I thought it would be. And went back, and he hired Brenda and then Bruce Cipher. We were the first three sort of assistant directors, along with a guy named Bruce Hyde, who was also a deputy director. We hired John Davis to help organize the Burlington Community Land Trust as a consultant from a group called the Institute for Community Economics.
Which he's still running today.
Which he sort of engaged in, he's certainly engaged actually in world, he now is working with CLTs from around the world.
Yeah.
But
So just talk about that a little bit. There was nothing like the CEDO office before that. And what was the purpose? What was the, what were you trying to do?
Well, the initial idea is that planning and development needed to be separate. That the people who are doing the planning and thinking about what the community needed in the zoning shouldn't be also people promoting the development work, but also it was community and housing. So it really had three focuses. It was not just let's do development. There was that. But it was what should we do around community development? And one of the first things was created was the neighborhood planning assemblies, and what should we do around housing? And there was a whole range of initiatives on housing that got created out of CEDO. And economic development was different too, even though there was still, we need some big developments and stuff. There was still this notion of jobs and people.
Yeah.
So let's create opportunities for economic development to grow out of what people need. Very micro business lending, that kind of stuff. South End Arts Center, at the early days. So a range of different things came out of CEDO. It really became the policy arm of the mayor. So whenever you wanted to do something, or the mayor wanted to do something, he looked towards CEDO, and this is both Clavel and Bernie before him, to create the policy. What should we do? So like Doug Hoffer was a staff person at CEDO in '89, and he created demand-side management thinking, meaning that let's not just produce electricity, let's save costs, save electricity, and we could really get the same result if we sort of manage the demand as well. So a whole range of things came out of that.
Which sets in motion the idea of conserving energy.
Yes, that's right.
Which is hard to imagine
was thinking about.
If you have a bottom line of producing profit.
Yeah.
Produce more energy, produce more profit.
Yeah. The whole idea is that you could actually do better if you conserve and reduce the demand.
Yeah.
Things like the Vermont Steps for Women, so the Vermont Works for Women now, we created a women's small business program, which became Mercy Connections in part. Those kinds of programs came out of CEDO, a whole range of programs and activities, still growing, still some of them around.
Yeah.
Community Justice Center ultimately became part of CEDO in the early days. But one of the big ones was the Burlington Community Land Trust that came out of CEDO, and which is now the organization I work for.
Yeah. Well, we can look in the archives and see what we have on that. There's a little clip here. Let's just see what this is about.
Okay.
So one of the reasons that we called you in is because we were doing this project of looking back at the archives and talking to folks who are in the archives. CCTV started in 1984.
Same
so
times.
as part of that same, in that same mix of energy, and was certainly supported. Mayor Sanders had a show.
That's right.
Went out and interviewed people in the community with Nat Air, one of the founders.
He loved us. He loved that whole idea.
Yeah, well, and he's still creating his own
Yeah.
media today, the Bernie Buzz. It's the same idea, except, here it was really rooted in community television. And here's a little clip of, it was aired on then Channel 15.
People that within the very near future we'll be seeing a lot of activity on our streets and sidewalks. The annual street and sidewalk repaving program is about to begin. In fact, the city is in the process of signing contracts. We'll be spending approximately $1 million this year to repave streets and sidewalks to improve handicapped accessibility. And that program is going well under the direction of the Public Works people. And we'll have them on
Was
in the
Steve
near
Goodkind
future to
director of
review with
Public
you,
Works at this
that
time,
issue.
or
A guy
not?
named George Crombie.
Oh, okay.
Steve was the engineer.
Michael,
Okay.
in terms of economic development, one of the issues that the Board of Aldermen has been discussing, that I know that you have been working a
Here we
lot
go.
on, is our relationship with the Navy in terms of the Navy Reserve Center at the foot of College Street. Can you review with the viewers what our goals are there and where we are in that process?
Well, 5 years ago, when the Community and Economic Development Office was first started, we made contact with the Navy for the potential of asking them to move to another site somewhere in Chittenden County. And some people think that that's sort of maybe a big mistake, but in truth, that the Navy Reserve doesn't use the waterfront at all. They use it every 3 weeks, and they have classrooms there, so they don't really have a use for the waterfront. And they recognized at the very beginning that there was a good reason for them to move, that that particular piece of land and that particular building was a
What's the date for this
prime
one?
waterfront
This
site.
one's
It was a key site.
1988. So does
that
this
the
bring
kinds of
back
uses
any
that the public
memories
could enjoy
of,
down
you know,
there.
this particular, heard you say, that project, they're still there,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, well, no, Navy's
The
gone.
Navy's gone,
The
but
Navy's gone.
the Coast Guard is there.
The Coast Guard is
Coast
there, yeah.
Guard's
This
there.
is,
Yeah, what was that story?
So the interesting thing is that at the time, the city owned almost nothing on the waterfront. It really had a little piece of Perkins Pier. That's even smaller than it is now. It owned a little part of College Street, and if you drove down College Street, you would see where they had torn down the entire Cherry Street neighborhood and dumped it into the lake. So when you went down a piece of College Street, there was a 12-foot high barbed wire fence on one side, a 12-foot high barbed wire fence on the other side, and this little rubble mound of asphalt and concrete.
Is that near the Peas Grain?
Well, no. Well, yes, but right by the Peas Grain. It's where the boathouse is now.
Yeah.
And if you go there right now, you'll see a big pier holding the boathouse in place. If you look underneath that pier, you'll still see that concrete and asphalt that was dumped there. That's the only piece of land that we owned. And the reason why the boathouse is there is because we really had nowhere else to put it. And the reason why it's on a boat is because we really didn't have any land to build anything on. So that was our initial foray. And the second part of what we really wanted to do was to see if we can get the adjoining land for other things. And the Naval Reserve Center was really, the idea was to see if we could relocate them. We worked with Leahy, who got an appropriation to relocate them. And that's essentially led to the first kind of science center kind of program that was there. Eventually became ECHO.
Well, I remember going to that early ECHO
No, look,
center.
it was just
It
the
was
blue building, so
adorable.
it's like, yeah,
It's
it
like
was
a real science center.
yeah,
You'd
it was
walk in
a
and
little
then,
tiny little bit. The existing buildings just got converted into, the classrooms got converted into spaces to do stuff. So that
Well-
was the reason why, that's the reason why it was really kind of an important next step for the waterfront. I'm not even not sure if the boathouse was built at that point, but I think it probably was.
now we do have this little clip here from 1987.
Oh, Jesus.
This is you and Nadir,
Riding up and down the bike path, is that what we did?
basically like that.
Yeah.
Using Nat's early titles.
I'm going to the photo lounge this Halloween.
That's not me.
That's not yet. We're gonna skip over this photo. There's a little. Let's skip over
The
this
notion
part.
of constructing a bike path along the city's waterfront has been an idea that
Oh, so that's
surfaced
down-
a number of years ago.
Yeah, this is the very down by North,
Seems like this notion
Star Farm.
way
was
way
on
down
its
at
way
the
to
edge by
reality in the
the
early
bridge now.
1980s. This was around the same time that the Community and Economic Development Office was created. At that time, with
So
a bit
we're
of
hearing the voice of
controversy,
Peter
there was a
Clavel, but
discussion
this is you
as to who
and
in
Nat
fact
are
would
on
be
the bike
responsible
path.
They're on bikes, I
for
think.
the planning and
was,
construction of the
When
riding
was
up
the
and
bike
down.
built?
of the
that
bike
built?
path.
So it was
After
built
some
in
controversy,
pieces
the
and
Board of
parts. A
Aldermen agreed
little
to
part was
delegate
built
that
in
responsibility to the Community
1983, and then
Economic
another.
Development
This section really got built right before in 80, right up to 86, and then the last part was built in 88 when the boathouse came into being. But really done in sections. There was like 2 or 3 different votes to support it.
This is the North 40, so this is Texaco Beach, which I just learned has a new name now, Dog Beach.
Well,
And then this is all that.
if you're living there, it's called Texaco Beach
Yeah, yeah,
by the folks who are living there now.
yeah. And now the path has been rerouted to go along the lake here.
Yeah, and this used to be on the other side because we didn't quite own that land yet. We were able to sort of get it right away to on this piece here,
Yeah.
but we really didn't own that part of the land yet. We didn't buy that land north of the what is the Moran plant until much later, probably 1990. So this is before that.
And here's where Foam Brewers is now,
Yeah.
and other businesses. This,
So, you know, basically successive votes to improve it. There's Peace Grain
yep.
that burned down, it came down. All
train station.
all this is so much different than it is now, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just an amazing level of change.
And what was the thought in the CEDO office or in the administration then, or, you know, you talked about being a Bookshire-nite and being a neighborhood. What was the thought about building something that was for the people who lived here, for tourists, for the community?
Yeah,
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. I think, well, there was one of the things that was proposed by the Sanders administration was something called the Alden Plan. And the Alden Plan was a massive redevelopment of the whole waterfront. And CEDO was promoting it, and we had really a couple of some local folks who were basically, saying they were the local developers and they were going to develop it. One of them was Flynn was his last name, and Lisa Steele, who was married to him, and they were the money and the support to get all the land, buy it all, and redevelop it into a range of different things, included a boathouse, it included a park, but it was a pretty high-level redevelopment. Even though that got support of the majority of the people, it still wasn't really as popular as it seemed, because people really wanted to simply see something happen.
Yeah.
Because the waterfront was just sitting there derelict. It had
Oil
tanks,
yeah.
and it was just a mess.
I loved it as a teenager. I loved going down there because it was derelict.
We had
I get it, yeah.
We had lots of people
Yeah.
in the King Street neighborhood who used to to go hang out on those beaches that was just south of the water treatment plant.
Yeah.
But I think people voted for it, and then yet when we went and it didn't get enough votes to go forward, we really started asking everybody, what should we do? And we started doing a survey and really getting into some scientific studies and understanding of things. And we wound up basically saying, let's do this. Let's take the public trust doctrine, which was being supported by Rick Sharp, but then was embraced by the city, and let's create the line where the public trust doctrine is. Everything on one side of the public trust site line, which is mostly Lake Street towards the lake, that's going to be public uses. Everything on the other side could be private uses.
Well, that did go to the Supreme Court,
Oh, I
didn't
remember
it?
that sweater too. I like that. Yeah.
That's what it,
Yeah.
did the public trust that went to Supreme
Public trust
Court?
went to the Supreme Court and
Yeah.
was solidified as sort of, yes, this is law. And basically it says that anything that is filled land, the state of Vermont, not this local city, really can determine what its uses are.
Yeah.
And the uses really were railroad wharfing and storage. That's all that could be allowed. And so we went, actually, after the Supreme Court said public trust guides its use, went to the legislature and said, railroad wharfing and storage, but public parks, public facilities, recreational facilities, those kinds of things. Actually, the railroad fought it.
Yeah.
Didn't want that to happen. So we had just barely won that. As a matter of fact, I think Madeline Kunin was lieutenant governor at the time, and we had to make all kinds of arrangements to make sure we had the one or two votes that got that passed. The amount of sort of not wanting to support that in the legislature was astounding, was stunning. They really were supporting the railroad and its private development ideas, and no, we don't need those parks. We need more development of some kind.
Yeah.
And we were fighting for, development over here and public spaces over there, and that's ultimately what we won, and we got that. For the most part, that's what the park is now.
Yeah.
You sort of see the park, you see the boathouse, the science center, the pier, the various things that have happened along the way.
And there's somewhat of a mix of the Mossman condominiums, which were some of the first,
Right.
which
They're
you
still
think
there.
of now, they're still there, and they
still
look
there.
very
Tiny.
tiny. And
They seemed
but they
big at the
were,
time.
they were like, they were
yeah.
the high-end
Yeah, yeah.
development that was going in. And then the CHT housing.
We
that's
have
on the
the
waterfront.
CHT was the first
Yeah.
affordable housing on the waterfront, and I think the second development of any kind, 40 affordable apartments,
Yeah.
and that was actually part of what we had done in the 80s around what housing was. create this notion of inclusionary zoning. And what we said is if you're going to do any kind of housing on the waterfront, at least 25% of it had to be affordable. So that's actually slowed down the amount of development that has occurred in terms of housing on the waterfront, but enabled us to really
Yeah.
move forward and do something good there.
It's one of the criticisms of inclusionary zoning, right? Is that
Yeah,
it slows housing development. But if you're not thinking about housing in this bigger context of why,
Yeah.
I mean, think about the Northgate project.
Yeah.
So let's just talk a little bit about Northgate and
All
your
right,
involvement,
let's go.
and we'll take a look at that as well. Tell us a little bit. What was your involvement with Northgate?
Well, I mean, I was on the edges of that as much as
Yeah.
anything. At CEDO, I was the CEDO director when we began to do work in support of making sure that the people of Northgate were not displaced. It was really a kind of a critical moment in the city of Burlington, but also in terms of housing policy. And the story is simple. Northgate was built by private developers, and after 20 years, the private developers could own it outright and then do whatever they wanted with it. And they had 330 apartments, 1,000 people, all those families. And essentially they were saying, we don't have to do affordability anymore. We're going to simply turn these into condominiums and really turn these into very fancy homes for everyone. And nobody in the city liked that. And in fact, I was talking to somebody recently, I was talking to Kurt Wright, and we said, the person who was really most against that.
I'll tell you what, Kurt, because, he's not out in the New North End, is he now?
He wasn't in the New North End, but I was talking to him because there was a guy named Alan Geer,
Yeah.
who was a Republican, who said, yeah, we shouldn't be doing that. If we take public money, we shouldn't give it to private guys and let them walking away with a huge profit.
That's right.
Public money really should be made sure that it continues to serve the community forever. That became the bulwark of permanently affordable housing. You don't create housing just for this generation or just once or for 5 years or 10 years. You do it permanently because you don't want to have that displacement or gentrification occur. That's what happened in the King Street neighborhood right now. It is permanently affordable, and as a result, that neighborhood has stayed stable as a lower income neighborhood that can support families. That Northgate was a critical piece for that. That became a really important part of
Welcome to the
what
ribbon
we
cut.
needed to do here in the city. It really changed housing policy, both in Burlington, but also in Vermont.
But it's this idea also that you're imbuing policy with values.
Yeah.
And that's the political side or the policies. Well, small p politics, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
policy behind politics.
Yeah.
And
Could you imagine if this didn't change, if that didn't change, all of those families would be out and gone.
yeah,
Brenda Torpy was a leadership in this. You see, that's
she was a
Jeannie-
community organizer, right?
yeah. Jeannie Morrissey was she did the work on the buildings
And
themselves.
Morrissey Construction.
It could have been, I don't know if it was Wright Morrissey at the time or if it was J.M. Morrissey, because she's got
but
branched
she's
up on
now
her.
Jean Morrissey Construction.
Yeah.
Big construction.
So she was leading all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But it was a critical moment
Let's listen
in
to it.
housing policy and in the city.
Let's see if we can get a good moment of the mayor saying something here.
Understand, many of us, and I know those of us who are assembled here, happen to believe that a democratic government with a small d that represents the people is not an evil thing. That's what democracy is about. The people coming together and standing together can make a difference. And in this instance, the difference is that hundreds and hundreds of working families now have decent, affordable housing. And that's because government and the people, in this instance, very motivated, strong people from this community, stood together with local government, state government, and federal government, and we made a difference. And for many of us, what that means is that we continue this effort, and we say that we have achieved something tremendous here in Northgate, that we want to continue that effort throughout our state to make sure that all of our people have affordable, decent housing. Now,
Yeah. So I mean, he's basically saying, we want to make sure that when we do this kind of housing, it isn't just for 5 years or 10 years or 15 years. It's permanent. People don't get displaced. developers don't walk away with a pile of money on the backs of the public dollars.
Yeah.
Really kind of a critical policy question. Sometimes at risk in Vermont, it feels, although I think fairly well supported, certainly in the legislature. Not true across the country.
Yeah.
You can actually go to parts of the country where they're building new affordable housing and losing even more because they haven't made that idea that it should be permanently affordable.
Yeah.
And if we had kept everything permanently affordable across the United States, we have so much more housing now. Yeah, progressive states have taken that on as sort of a point of view, but it really started with this Northgate as a symbol of we can't have these 1,000 people.
And one of the things particularly in Northgate is that this became the homeowner. I mean, it became owned.
Oh yeah, I mean the critical
the ownership piece. So it's the largest, or it was the largest affordable housing development. I think there may be one, right?
No, I think this might be it. There are other gates around the country, around the state. There's emo. There are a lot of gates around the state, but I think this one's the largest. And this is resident owned, and we are still engaged in supporting them. Actually, we count them as part of our portfolio, even though we don't do the management of it. We don't own it outright, but we're sort of in this part of the corporation which allows us to be backstops to the whole resident owned, controlled, work that is going on there. They're meeting regularly. People, Brenda still goes to those meetings. People are still participating in that work. So.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about, well, first of all, is there anything else that you're kind of curious about from the archives as you see these couple of clips we've got? Originally I just searched your name, so I don't know, Kevin, if you wanted to show this part for a minute, where I'm just going to search for Monte and to see what comes up. And we have
a
lot of programs. So there's 40,000 or so programs that go back to 1984, and the archives continue to grow. And then, well, you're not the Count of Monte Cristo.
No.
But even just here's a Triple E program. What can you do with $20 million from homelessness to home ownership? So that's a program that you just did.
Oh yeah.
In March of 2024.
God, I remember that.
Yeah, it's like it was yesterday.
That was only a few months ago, right?
Yeah, back to the 1992, and then of course wherever
that's
you
not really
see.
archivy. That's really just recent, though. That doesn't count.
Well, our archive starts the day it's recorded.
Okay.
So if we record it today, it's part of the archives, and then because we're making history. I mean, this is part of the thing. Talk about the Bookshonite. I mean, what I learned from Murray Bookchin is that we are agents of history.
Yeah.
We are, whatever part you're playing, you're creating your future and you're creating the past.
Right.
And so I think it's pretty amazing, pretty interesting to see all this stuff here. So anything you see that has just the logo means it's on the shelf, but it hasn't been digitized. So like the Parian War protest. What is that?
I don't know.
Fascinating. So we'll have to put that in the queue to be digitized and find out what that could possibly be.
So those are not digitized. The
So
Waterfront ballot items are not digitized.
So we got about half of the tapes digitized at this point, and then
we did do a CEDO show here once, and I hosted it most of the time. Yeah, it was called the CEDO show. Is this it?
Yeah, I don't think you're not the host
not
of this
always.
one.
Thanks to everyone for joining us live
Jen
at
Green.
5:25
I'm not
this
always the host.
afternoon. My name is Jennifer Green, and I am the co-coordinator of the Burlington Legacy Project. The Burlington Legacy Project, for those of you that may not remember, is Burlington's vision for 2030. It came to pass in 2000 when residents from throughout the city, about 1,000 folks.
Yeah.
She still works for BED, and she's still sort of doing that kind of work. And the interesting part is I left CEDO when Peter lost his election in '93, and was a city councilor from '94 to '96, but then rejoined CEDO in 2000. And the two things that were really interesting at that time, one was the city market being developed, because we didn't have a supermarket downtown. And the other one was the Burlington Legacy Project, which really focused in on economic development, social equity, and environment, and really was the precursor for sort of the kind of thinking that goes on right now about how to deal with the climate and all that. This is about making sure that those kinds of things were paid attention to. And Legacy was a part of CEDO at the time. Again, going back to CEDO being the policy think tank for anything that the mayor wanted to sort of move forward. So,
Yeah. In 2023, City Market celebrated their 50 years, and I think
Hi, I'm Sheree with City Market. Welcome to our 50th anniversary celebration. We're here today with a number of our food vendors.
one of the things that they
The co-op, its leadership, John and the entire team, and the members and the board for their commitment to serve this community. Congratulations and happy anniversary.
Hi there, my name is John Tashiro, General Manager at City
So
Market.
talk a little bit about some of the things that you've learned from these early housing developments. When you look, right around the corner from Bobbin Street Mills, that's pre Sanders administration.
right.
Up until today, we have, I walk by the pods on a regular basis. What have you learned about putting people together in community and building spaces, and how do you get beyond just build more housing into what's going to really make a thriving community?
Yeah, I agree. I get that. So one of the things, though, I learned from when we sort of did City Market, because the City Market was the right choice, I think, for downtown, but also people were critical about having so few choices at a City Market, a smaller store. That's the size store that was going to be built there, but people saying, I don't want to have to buy tofu, I want to be able to buy meat. Good people who are my friends who felt that way and were critical of it. But what I learned from that is that in the world of buying stuff at supermarkets, we all have our own personal choices. We like a certain kind of ketchup. I don't like that ketchup. I like this kind of ketchup, and I only like this kind of bottle. And when it turns around, like it's that kind of. We have these personal choices. Housing is a bit that way too. We all have our very personal choices about what we want. I couldn't imagine not having a front porch, but that's me, right?
Yeah.
That's my personal choice. And so one of the things that I understand, that we understand is, and it's interesting because the Community Land Trust started as let's promote home ownership, permanently affordable home ownership for everyone, and over time has grown into meeting people where they are and for what they need. So we now have a motel we operate for homeless folks. We have a pods community on Auburn Avenue. We have helped develop facilities like the Champlain Inn now for CVO they're on, which is a new place, or Steps to End Domestic Violence for their building. There's group homes, there is supportive housing with the motels we've converted. There are larger apartment complexes with four stories with elevators. There are smaller houses. There are co-ops, 6 of them, operating in a completely different way. There's Northgate.
Yeah.
There is single-family homes that are home ownership. There are scattered site rentals. There are places in Fairfax, and there are places in downtown Burlington, right across the street from City Hall Park.
Yeah.
And all of those kinds of different needs from our perspective, is sort of meeting the variety of needs for affordable housing. The housing market overall, I think, is right now somewhat broken because the only thing that really can be built in Burlington, other than if we're not making it affordable, is going to be something that's very expensive. And that's just the way it is. Even if I sort of said, okay, private developers, you're not going to get any money out of this. The cost of construction, the cost of sort of, I'm not going to say permits because it's not permits, but all the things that need to go into making sure that the housing is being built on good land, not brownfields land, all of those issues, the design, the cost of borrowing money, the cost of materials, labor, all of those things making sense. By the time you're done, it's expensive. And there's no way you could actually rent anything, even if we were just sort of doing it on our own and we weren't going to take any profit, even take any fees. that you weren't going to rent anything for that's going to be very expensive for people. So the private market has a role because
Boy, that
they're-
is depressing.
Huh?
How do you get out of that? That is a depressing story that you're telling.
Well, it's true.
Yeah, no, but
It's
how do
absolutely true.
How do you
And-
get out of that?
Well, I mean, I think the thing is that there may be some change in terms of interest rates at some point. That's going to help quite a bit. But most of the time, it's that market is simply going to be satisfied in some way, and they're going to satisfy some part of the sector of the market where there are middle-income people who can, afford to rent it. I mean, if you're renting an apartment that is a one-bedroom for $2,200. That's the median income. You're meeting the median income needs, which is I did the same thing. I'm going, what? $2,200? Wait, shouldn't it be like $700, $800, $1,000 maybe? That's what we rent them for, $1,000, $1,100.
Yeah.
That's the affordable rent.
Yeah.
But in the private side, that's what it is. In
What's
the private
quick math? What's the quick math? What are you going to make if you're spending if you're only supposed to spend a quarter of your income on housing?
It's a third of your income, more or
Third
less.
of your income on housing. How much do you have to make a year? $2,200.
2,200, yeah, it's the 66 times, it's like 78,
80,000?
72, 78, yeah, 80,000.
Yeah.
It's not cheap.
70, 80,000, not.
No, but not very many people are making
many
that
people
unless
are
two
making
people
that.
are making
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And that's why, that's why that kicker
Then you
should be
need
thrown
hou-
off the
then you need
field.
Childcare.
And
then
yeah.
you need childcare, and then
Yeah.
you need services
Yeah.
in your neighborhood.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And so, but if you're making 80,000 a year, 70,000 a year, and if there's two of you, you're just getting by. But at least you have housing and you have childcare. You don't have much of anything else. Maybe an old car.
Yeah.
But once you get below that, once you get into minimum wage jobs, or even at $20 an hour, it gets to be harder.
Yeah.
Once you're on Social Security, it's impossible.
Yeah.
So even with the affordable housing that we have, about 45% of the housing, of the people we house, have also vouchers to assist them in being in the housing. Because if you're on an SSI kind of program and you're making $1,200 a month, you need subsidy, you need support.
And this is the policy place, this is what I learned from looking into Northgate was, you wanted people who are serving the community living in the community.
Yeah.
You don't want all of the folks who are serving the community to be driving in
That's right.
from out of town. And who can do it anyway?
Yeah.
I mean,
I think the housing market is broken that way. I'm not against necessarily. I mean, I understand that people are going to be building the fancy housing. Like I said, everybody has a little bit of need for different things. But to think that just letting the private sector build our way through affordability is just nonsense.
yeah.
It's just false. The only way you could build long-term affordability is to provide some amount of support and subsidy, and to lock it in. And that's Chittenden County, and this is mostly a Chittenden County kind of show, right? So,
It's most,
you know, if you go to some rural areas, it's going to be a little different. You know, our market is, there's the vacancy rate is 1%. Some of the develops going up, the rents are $4,000, $4,500. Not everything's like that, though. There's a lot of existing housing that's been around for a long time where the rents are, I'm going to say now, naturally occurring affordable. Like they're $1,500, $1,200. May feel like a lot of money still.
Yeah.
But relative to what's going on the market itself, is actually okay. You know, a lot of the current older stock, where you have somebody who owns a property and they own a bunch of units and they're just renting it. Now the problem
There's not
is
many of those. I'll tell you,
more and more they're going.
them,
And a good example of what has happened is in Winooski, where Bove had that kind of housing and decided to tear it down and build 75 units of stuff that's going to be much, much higher, displacing 20 families, most of them people of color, most of them people with a second language, and it's created some havoc in that city in terms of displacing what have become traditional communities in Winooski. And more of that is going on. To me, that's the real compelling issue for housing right now. We'd like to build more housing, build more affordable housing. We got a whole bunch of stuff in line. I would love to be able to go buy 1,000 of the units that are existing out there right now, hold on to them, and not make the rents go up so high.
Yeah.
Not people going, hey, I can get $2,800 for this $1,200, $1,300, $1,500 apartment, you know.
What do you dream about at night?
No, I think I try to balance my life a little
Yeah,
bit.
good, because that's a lot. Well, that's your day job,
Yeah.
and you've had this run with the city. You've been involved in the waterfront development. You've been involved in supporting youth development. You've been involved in housing development. What else sort of stands out in your mind? Well, city market development you talked about. What else stands out in your mind over the last few years that you've been at this?
Well, I mean, I the last 3 to 4 or 5 years have been just stunning. I mean, really are, and I don't think anybody could just sort of go back, oh yeah, so what was it like in May of 2020 without going, oh yeah, that's right. You know, we all got locked in and we were washing our mail. You know, it was a pretty amazing sort of time. And that period, I think, has stuck. And I think
Some of it has.
Some of it has.
I mean, we'll see what happens in this next year as programs are sunsetting.
Yes.
ARPA funds are.
And those are disappearing. But I think the crisis that happened during that period of time, and it was noticeable right away, is that nobody could double up or triple up or hang out with their friends and sleep on their couches. Everybody had to go somewhere. So you wound up a lot of people in the motel programs. And that became like a real clarity about how many people were really homeless or not having a permanent housing for themselves. Then another range
Well,
of...
here's what's fun is this. Here you are. Here you are. You could go back and see.
Oh my God, am I in my house?
You're in your house. This is in.
How do you have this at your fingertips?
This is. You're in your house, and this
Michael Monte, welcome. It's just a pleasure to see you here. How are you doing today?
We're doing good. How are you?
March 30th, 2020.
I'm well.
Wow. Yeah.
So as the operational leader of Champlain Housing Trust, you were thinking about the COVID-19 epidemic, I think probably sooner than most people in the community.
Yeah.
How did you prepare? What did you see and how did you prepare?
Well, I mean, we have a great
All
team
these things
of
were
people and
fairly
department heads and
fast.
leadership in different sections of the organization. So we
So you could go back and
immediately
look at what
began
you
to
said.
sort of say, okay,
See what I was saying back
we're gonna have to
then.
do a lot of remote work. Let's start that process, get IT running, get people laptops, get people all the resources they need to be able to work at home. We're going to need to continue to just do emergency kind of, repairs, and how do we think about that? So we
So yeah, I think Lauren Glenn reached out and did a series called the Caremongers.
Yeah, it was a year or two of just sort of, we were, I mean, during that period we bought 6 or 7 motels. We turned one of them into a COVID isolation quarantine facility. We went out and started renovating different properties so people could be safe in terms of how they were doing. We were washing everything. I mean, it was a really remarkable time. I don't remember actually, that's when I didn't sleep or have dreams.
Yeah, yeah.
It was a lot of people doing a lot of emergency responsiveness. During this time, me and a group of about 6 or 7 or 10 others were meeting every day trying to figure out what to do around housing and homelessness that was happening right at that moment.
Yeah.
Where to put people up. We had
What's stuck? What has stuck since then?
Well, I mean, what stuck was really the level of homelessness that has occurred. That really is what stuck.
That's stuck.
That's stuck in a big way,
Yeah.
right? It's not.
Yeah.
And I could see it even.
I think it was. We had CJC here, and they said we went from average about 50 people on the streets daily to well over 250.
Right before COVID hit, we had identified and knew the names of the 50 people who were chronically homeless, who, if we built the housing for them, we would be at zero homelessness. I mean, the homelessness would happen maybe for a month, for a few weeks, and then people would have found an apartment, but the chronically homeless folks. Now I think that number is, is like 300 to 400 or 500 in Chittenden County, right? And stunning.
Just in Chittenden County, so
yeah,
it's in the
stunning
2,000.
Stunning in terms of its impact.
Yeah.
Part of that was that, I mean, I got to say, there was certainly a level of trauma and mental health issues. I was very healthy. I was strong. I had a lot of folks around me in my family. I did fine. I know people who really still, even during that time, who were regular folks, let's say regular folks didn't have any typical things, came out of it going, I'm not too sure about what to do, in their lives. that impacted people with, so there's a higher level of mental health issues. A lot of people said, I am scared, I don't know what's going on, I'm going to just do some drugs, a bit of that. And so now you have a complex problem.
Yeah.
It's now just not homelessness, it's a range of issues relative to sort of addiction and mental health.
Yeah.
And the only thing that's
And to be clear, these are not because of individual issues. These are systemic. I mean,
these are systemic issues. Well, the interesting thing is, right, if we had a vacancy rate that was at 6%, if we had more affordable housing, it would not be as big of an issue. The level of homelessness
we
would
might
be
not see it.
stunningly less.
Yeah,
well,
we might not see the issue
people at
either,
least would
yeah.
be housed and then
Yeah.
get services in their homes or in programs, but they wouldn't have to be, living in the little cubby in front of Nectar's.
Yeah.
Or I just passed a State Department building, state building on what's Pearl Street.
Okay.
And there was a whole pile of people living in there.
Yeah.
That's what
In
they
the federal building.
In the
Yeah.
And I'm just going. We wouldn't have that.
Yeah.
People would be in housing, and then getting support and services. Yeah. So the whole notion of housing first is really important. So if we had housing, we could get people housed, and then secondly, what's really important as a follow-up is a range of services for folks. Now the truth is, though, that some of the drugs have really just created some havoc. The nature of the drug is really bad.
Yeah.
And it's a lot harder. You used to be able to be a functioning alcoholic. You used to be able to be a functioning heroin addict even. Some of the drugs now don't allow you to function well. And that's the distinction and difference between now and 4 or 5 years ago. How fentanyl has changed sort of the brain of the people who are addicted, and how that has an impact on their ability to sort of do the next thing that's going to be right. And isn't like heroin addicts were all like, yay, but it was just different drug in terms of the kind of high and how it impacted you and how often you needed it.
Yeah.
So it's just that's what's changed. That's a big thing.
Well, and that brings me a little bit to the question of, we talked about King Street as an advocacy organization and CHT as an advocacy organization beyond advocating for the specific issues that affect you as an organization or advocating for your organization. What does CHT do around those issues in the advocacy sphere in drug addiction and substance abuse?
We spent a lot of time in the legislature looking this past year, looking for and advocating for ways of bringing enough resources and support to create more affordable housing and more services for people who are homeless. We really actually had created a framework which had been embraced by the House but not by the Senate, which was going to allow for a certain number of housing and services to be built over the next 10 years, which is really going to really solve this issue. It was going to basically take pandemic level of support, which is going to be dropping off dramatically now, and sustaining that over a bunch of years. It included taxing wealthy people to pay for that. But it really was a program that the House embraced.
Was this the taxing folks over the 500,000 threshold?
Yeah, and then being able to bring enough resources so that the state, the various programs in the state could really begin to build the housing that is necessary to get people into housing, or the programs that are necessary to get people into to be healthy, or that kind. It really was addressing all of that. So there was a solution laid out, or at least a path.
Yeah.
So when you said, what did we do? We advocated for that. We actually helped create that. We actually initiated that idea, got the support of a lot of other folks, and pushed that through. But for the Senate, I think, we would have had that passed. I'm not sure if the governor would have supported it ultimately, but still. It's still an idea that still has... I think is being embraced by some Senate leaders still now. It didn't just fall. It was just perhaps too bold, a little bit too quick for some. Sometimes that was what happens in government. So we'll see, hopefully next year it could be supported across both the legislative bodies and become law.
Well, it obviously seems like CHT needs to have its own TV show about current issues.
Okay.
Because we're talking about the archives. I'm going to end us on a little.
We were less archivey than I thought.
Yeah, we got. Well, I guess you're not archived.
I'm not archived just
You're
yet.
not archived yet.
Is that the new thing?
Yeah.
You're not archived yet.
So let's just real quick. Let's take a look at this and see. I don't know why this came up under your name. I don't know why.
Is this Circus?
This was. So this is
Am I in
Church
here?
Street. There's that pier is where that's where that Lunig's kiosk is.
Yeah. The bus.
Cars look so old.
They do.
It's only 1987.
I remember her. She used to own a bunch of buildings downtown.
Did she own the bookstore?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A bunch of others.
She owned Everyday Books, or I can't remember what that was
She
called.
She owned a bunch of buildings down there. Oh.
That's you.
Come on, once more.
I'm doing I'm doing an elephant imitation.
You're doing an elephant
Jesus.
imitation. I did not know that was there, but that is really a good way.
Yeah, that's funny.
So there's an elephant on
There
Church
must be
Street.
a parade, and I'm doing an elephant imitation.
There's an elephant that comes to Church Street and is on display.
funny.
It's 1987.
The
Church
Circus?
Street had been established.
Yeah.
Church Street was Church Street under the Sanders administration? Or?
Well, it happened. It was really supported by the previous administration,
Yeah.
and it began to be developed during
Yeah,
Bernie's.
yeah, because that was, I think, Pat Robbins
81,
and
82, yeah.
And so, I think we're looking at
An elephant now. That's going to come out.
in the.
That's great.
the
And
thing
you
that's
have
gonna
me
come
doing an imitation. That's really an important part of my. I've
Legacy.
always
That
appreciated
is-
the fact that I could do an elephant imitation. Actually, that was
Well,
a skill I did have.
We are more than the sum of our greatest accomplishments. We're our worst moments.
That's pretty
So,
funny. I'm glad you found that one.
Yeah. Well, it has been a pleasure. We'll let this.
Thank you so
We'll
much.
sort of let this play out. It's been a pleasure to talk with you. I think there's so much more to uncover in the story.
There's certainly. Well, mainly because I'm also not archived yet, as you said, and I'm still engaged in sort of current stuff, and so it shows up. It has history, but also it shows up in current things. So.
Yeah. Well,
Happy to come back.
We'll have you back.
Future archives. We can
Future
talk about,
archives.
what should the archive have in the future?
Yeah. I just need to skip through to the point where we see this elephant come out because
Wow.
there it is. You remember it?
No.
You don't remember? You were there.
Well, for no apparent reason. I don't know why I was there. I was just probably hanging out, and that caught me. Caught me at a weak moment.
Oh, you were probably walking by, headed to
I
work.
was probably getting lunch someplace, and the elephant shows up.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. It's a pleasure.
Really
Okay.
appreciate it. Yeah.
Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
CCTV.